Hello, and welcome to the HelpMeSellMyCar.com Photography 101 guide. In this initial photography guide, we describe some of the basics you should have in mind before taking any photos of your vehicle. Firstly, we will cover what you need to have ready before going any farther. Then, we discuss the photography term exposure. We will explain what it means, how it affects your photos, and basic instruction on how to adjust your device for proper exposure. Finally, we give some recommendations on what to consider when choosing a location for your photography. You should have the following ready before taking photos of your vehicle. You must have your car prepared to photograph. Ideally, you should treat it as if you are ready to hand the keys off to the buyer, so its exterior should be washed to the best of your ability, and you should go through the interior and remove anything that isn't included in the sale. Furthermore, the interior should be vacuumed and dusted at a minimum. If any more intensive cleaning is necessary, that should also be completed prior to proceeding. You may also wish to remove your vehicle's license plates if you don't wish to blur them out afterwards. Secondly, you should determine a time and location. We will discuss this in more detail later in this video, but basically you should think of a place that adds to your photos rather than detracts from them. Of course, you must also have a device to photograph with. Unless you are familiar with the various settings of a full-fledged camera and how each one affects your photos, we highly recommend sticking with the smartphone camera for reasons described later in this video. If you wish to learn how to take full advantage of a dedicated camera, please watch our Photography 301 and 302 guides. Please note that all the photos you see in this video were taken on a cell phone rather than a dedicated camera. So, why do we recommend a smartphone over a dedicated camera? Our primary reason for suggesting that you avoid a dedicated camera in favor of a smartphone is that one can very easily produce quality photos from a smartphone, whereas a dedicated camera requires more effort and knowledge to control. A smartphone only requires a few taps on its screen to make any necessary adjustments. Most dedicated cameras are less user-friendly. Also, most reasonably recent smartphones will take photos that are of more than sufficient quality to get your listing seen. Furthermore, for a variety of technical reasons, your smartphone may actually take better pictures of your vehicle than a dedicated camera would in full automatic mode. Lastly, using your smartphone rather than a dedicated camera potentially saves you from having to purchase any additional equipment. However, we do recommend that you do the following before using your phone's camera. Firstly, make sure that you are taking a normal photograph. Apple devices have a function called Live Photo that creates a short video every time you take a picture. Some Android phones have similar functionality. Most, if not all, of the files created in this manner are incompatible with listing websites, so you will have to redo everything if you use it. We also strongly recommend that you turn off any and all filters and adjustments, such as vivid saturation or any HDR or portrait modes. The vast majority of these settings work against your ability to create a professional looking photograph and, in some cases, dramatically reduce the overall quality of your photo. We also recommend turning off your camera's flash. For exterior shots, your phone's flash will only cause you trouble. Flash may or may not be useful for some interior shots, but in most cases, your photos will look better if you use the scene's natural lighting. You should also try to avoid using your phone's zoom. On most devices, all you are doing is cropping your photo down from its native resolution, therefore reducing quality. Simply get closer to your subject to fill your frame. The only exception to this would be if your phone has multiple lenses, in which case we recommend using the middle option. However, be sure not to add any additional zoom for the reasons mentioned previously. Lastly, it is better to shoot in landscape orientation. That is, you should hold your phone so it is longer width-wise than it is tall. Most listing sites aren't formatted to make portrait-oriented photos look very good, so do yourself a favor and just shoot in landscape. The only exception would be if you just absolutely positively cannot capture a given shot in landscape without ruining the rest of the picture. Regardless of whether or not you are using a smartphone or a dedicated camera, you must consider the exposure of every photograph you take. What is exposure? In basic terms, exposure is the brightness and/or darkness of a photo. Please note exposure can refer to a photo as a whole or just a certain area. You have no doubt seen a photo where the background is significantly brighter or darker than the foreground. This is a common situation and one you will likely encounter when photographing your car. In most cases, you will have to decide which of the two brightness levels you need to adjust for. In doing so, you will correctly expose one part of your photo, but under or overexpose the other. Exposure is nearly always a compromise unless you can control every source of light, so your goal is to simply make the best of any given situation. Here is an example of a photo where the subject, in this case a vehicle, is underexposed. That is, it is way too dark. As you can see in this example, it is nearly impossible to see the design of the black wheels because they and everything around them are essentially equally dark. Here is the same photo except on the other end of the scale, meaning it is overexposed. You can now see the wheels, but the silver paint and chrome trim look nearly white. This is a photo that has been exposed to maintain detail in the dark portions of the picture without making the rest of the car too bright. Now that we've described what exposure is, you might be wondering why you should care. Mainly, your photos will look significantly more professional. We've perused thousands of vehicle for sale listings, and the biggest issue with most ads photos is a misunderstanding of how to set exposure correctly. Therefore, if your listing has properly exposed photography, you are guaranteed to stand apart from anyone else who doesn't. Also, as you may have noticed earlier, a properly exposed photo often shows more detail. As such, buyers will potentially be able to see the various features and options on your car that make it different from others of its model. Finally, you should care about accurate exposure because it is incredibly easy to adjust in your smartphone, as you will now see. Assuming you are using a modern smartphone camera, adjusting exposure is extremely easy. Again, if you are using a dedicated camera, please check out the aforementioned Photography 301 and 302 videos where we discuss the various settings more thoroughly. While the various camera applications have minor differences in the way they look, most, if not all, allow you to simply tap your phone's screen to select a focus point. Doing so also tells the phone to adjust exposure for that specific area. After the camera finishes adjusting, look over the scene. You should, to the best of your ability, determine if what you see in your phone is acceptable. If it is, go ahead and take the picture. If it needs further adjustment, you can either tap somewhere else, or if it's available within the application that you're using, use the slider that pops up to adjust the overall exposure up and down. Once you get used to the procedure, adjusting each photo's exposure will only take a few moments, and your photos will look significantly better. Now that you have seen the effect of exposure on a photo, we will describe how location can help or hurt your photo's exposure. The biggest and most obvious effect a location can have on photography is the amount of overall light. Shooting in low light makes it much more difficult to shoot quality photographs, whereas shooting in extreme daylight might make it difficult to find a good compromise in your camera's settings. This is because the harsh, directional light, such as that created by the midday sun, creates dark shadows under and around your vehicle. In most cases, your camera will be incapable of exposing for both the extreme bright and extreme dark portions of the photo, and thusly make for less helpful photos. While in most cases it is unlikely to be a huge problem, some locations with a significant amount of reflective objects can cause you issues. As such, if you find yourself struggling with reflections off of your car's paint, you may wish to find a new location entirely. Knowing all of this, how does one find an appropriate location? The first thing to keep in mind is to find an area that doesn't distract the viewer from the subject. Remember, you're trying to sell your car, not the photo to a magazine. Therefore, it is best to have a nondescript location that adds only mild visual interest and keeps any prospective buyers focused only on your vehicle. Secondly, whatever location you choose to shoot in should have sufficient space for you to not only park your car, but that also allows you to get back far enough to fit your subject in your camera's frame. Furthermore, the space must be large enough for you to be able to walk around your car, open its doors, and anything else you may need to do to get the photos you need. Thirdly, the location should ideally provide reasonably consistent lighting across the scene. In most cases, this can be easily achieved by taking your photos outside during sunrise or sunset, the period of the day known as the golden hour. You can easily determine when exactly this occurs in your area with a simple search online for golden hour today. In lieu of that, taking them on an overcast day will achieve a similar effect. Finally, and in conjunction with the previous point, the lighting of your location should be of high quality. What does that mean? Not only should there be a sufficient amount of light for your camera to take a good picture, but it should all be of the same general color. We won't go into much detail on white balance in this video, but if you mix various light sources to add light, the result will be significantly less attractive in comparison to one taken with consistent lighting. The following are a few ideas for locations that may be available to you that look nice in a non-distracting way. For instance, a local park. There will often be surrounding tree cover that will help disperse and diffuse sunlight, potentially making it easier to expose the scene. A low-travel gravel side road in the country offers similar benefits and looks especially nice with crossovers, SUVs, and pickups. A campsite potentially mixes views from the previous ideas and offers the convenience of plentiful space. Finally, if possible, taking your vehicle to a lake or ocean front may be worth considering. It should be noted that water can be very difficult to photograph around during the day, so if you go this route, we would strongly recommend only doing so early or late in the day. Of course, depending on your area, you may have other opportunities, or the above options may either not be available or not conducive to your photos. Be creative and take the opportunity to stand out. Just be sure and do so safely. Conversely, we would not recommend a few places that we've seen in many listings. Your garage? We'll speak for ourselves, but most garages we've seen are not large enough for one to adequately move around in easily. They don't offer very good lighting, and most aren't clean or empty enough to not be a distraction. We would also not recommend using a typical driveway. This one is very dependent on your location in your neighborhood in terms of looks, but we also hesitate to recommend it because of the potential implications on your privacy. Unless you diligently remove any possible address references from your photos, you are opening up the potential for others to see around your home and surrounding area. Another area that often doesn't lend itself well to photography are large parking lots. While you will potentially have plenty of space, there are enough things in the background that may prove distracting or reflective. Furthermore, if you arrive at a busy time of day, you will likely have to avoid and deal with other people and cars while you try to shoot. Of course, there are no hard and fast rules against using these sort of locations, so if you find one that meets your needs and requirements, there's no problem with doing so. Thank you for watching our video. Here's a quick recap of what we have discussed. Be sure and thoroughly clean your car's interior and exterior before you take any photos. It doesn't have to be perfect, just presentable. Know when a picture isn't exposed properly and how to adjust it on your chosen device. Exposure affects all photography. As you practice and get better at noticing when your device makes a mistake, the better your pictures will be. Finally, choose a location for your photo shoot that benefits your listing. A great location will make your listing stand out even further from the rest, especially if you follow our other recommendations presented in this video and throughout our site. The next video in our photography series, Photography 102, describes how to take what you have learned and apply it to your listing pictures by detailing what we call the fundamental 6 photos that should be present in every listing. Thanks again for watching this video and for visiting helpmesellmycar.com. Please peruse the rest of the site for more tips, tricks, and recommendations on how to get your car sold. We wish you luck!